Good afternoon, my beautiful babes and babettes. I am your resident active advocate, and today we're going to be starting something that I should have started at the start of the week. How many times can I say start in a sentence? Anyway, we are going to begin to discuss the IASR, or Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation. I know that sounds dry, and it kind of is, but this document goes hand in hand with the AODA, Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, which became part of Ontario law in 2005, with the goal of making Ontario entirely accessible by the year 2025. Good luck with that, A, and B, we are nowhere close, and we are 4 years away from the deadline. So I wanted to start with the IASR rather than the AODA, even though the AODA is the one that everyone has kind of heard about, because this document, the IASR, provides scaffolding for the AODA. So to understand the one, you kind of have to understand the other. And I think that starting with the IASR is a better idea because the AODA is a lot bigger. But also, I will be jumping around in the IASR. I'm not going to go in, numerical order necessarily. I will from top to bottom, but I'm going to be jumping sections. So we're actually starting with section 3, which is employment, because employment standards for people with disabilities in Ontario, we're going to go through this, and you can see with me how very, very, very lacking they can be, okay? Just an FYI, I promised myself I wouldn't do this, but I'm doing this. I'm going into this cold-ish. I've read this document twice before, but I haven't read it today, so this is going to be interesting. Don't mind me if I flubble a few words. This is all legalese. Easier legalese, but still. All right. This is also all in a Word doc, which accessibility-wise is fine, but I have to increase the font size, which is okay. All right. So to start at the top, Part 3, Employment Standards. All right. Like I say, we're going to be jumping parts, but we're going to hit every point by the end of this thing. All right, so scope and interpretation. The standards set out in this part apply to obligated organizations that are employers and A, apply in respect of employees, and B, do not apply in respect of volunteers and other non-paid individuals. All right, so if you are an employee proper, you receive a paycheck or pay in some form, right? This applies to you. Also applies to you if you are an employer, not just an employee. Does not, however, apply to volunteers in various organizations. All right. In this part, a reference to an employer is a reference to an obliged organization as an employer, unless the context determines otherwise. So, okay, the organization is the employer, just to clarify language there. Schedule. This is one of the linchpins. Unless otherwise specified in a section, obligated organizations as employers shall meet the requirements set out in this part in accordance with the following schedule. This is a really weird font. 1. For the Government of Ontario and the Legislative Assembly, January 1st, 2013. Okay, that was a while ago. That was almost 10 years ago. As we go through this, we are going to see consecutive rounds of failure to meet the expected expectations. 2. For large designated public sector organizations, January 1st, 2014. 3. For small designated public sector organizations, January 1st, 2015. 4. For large organizations, January 1st, 2016. 5. For small organizations, January 1st, 2017. All right, so by 2017, even though the AODA permits up to 2025 to have the whole thing implemented, it's not gonna work. It hasn't worked so far, and we're gonna get to that. So, yeah. All right, recruitment general. Every employer shall notify its employees and the public about the availability of accommodation for applicants with disabilities in its recruitment processes. All right, so basically this is just saying that when you go on a company's website to apply for a job, or if you call the company or send them a letter or go to them in person, they are obliged to report to you in writing or verbally if you go to see them in person, whether they are accessible, whether they meet the accessibility standards set forth by the AODA, and to what degree they meet those expectations and those standards. Okay? This is part of the reason why a lot of people with disabilities don't disclose that they have disabilities going into the jobs. Trust me, we don't. All right? Recruitment, assessment, or selection process. During a recruitment process, an employer shall notify job applicants when they are individually selected to participate in an assessment or selection process that accommodations are available upon request in relation to the materials or processes to be used. Okay, I'm going to maximize my camera here because I want to talk directly to you all about this one. Accommodation available upon request, at least in my mind. You can interpret this in whatever way you want, but this is the way I interpret this. That comes, I think, very much out of the medical model of disability. If you go way yeehaw back in time on this channel, I discussed what the medical model of disability is. But for a refresher, for those of you who have not been here from the beginning and or don't remember, because like I say, it was way yeehaw long ago, the medical model places disability specifically in the body or the mind of the person in question. So for me, it would be, I'm blind in my left eye, can't see very well out of my right eye, right? So I am classified as visually impaired under the medical model. The medical model sort of gives individuals responsibility for taking care of their own needs, and I don't necessarily see a problem with that if you are capable of doing so. But we're going to discuss the other half of this equation. The other half of this equation is the social model. Okay, so you have a bit of a dichotomy, a separation between the medical model and the social model of disability. The social model of disability says, I may be physically different from the majority of the human population, okay? Because of my vision and other things. Name a major organ and I'll tell you what's wrong with mine. Fun game to play at parties. But, okay, with the visual impairment, just to use a specific example, the medical model says that I am visually impaired, therefore I am the one responsible for my own accommodation. The social model would say, I may be physically different from the majority of the population, but because I have no control over that, because that is not my fault, so to speak, society is the thing that disables me, not my body, okay? Society is set up in such a way as to favor the non-disabled majority, the people who do not have such physical differences as a visual impairment. Just as one example, okay? There are myriads of different things that can be classified as disabilities, be they physical, be they intellectual, be they emotional, be they social. All right? Myriads of things. But under the social model, all of those things could be properly integrated into the wider society if the wider society recognized its role in disabling people. Rather than putting the onus on the individual, the social model puts the onus on society. So, the problem I have, getting back to the topic at hand, with having to disclose at the very start of a job is that if you go in there and say, I have XYZ disability or disabilities and therefore require accommodation, the problem I have here is that accommodation is not built into the system automatically, okay? It's more of a mental add-on on the part of the employer or organization, and even on the part of society. If we get up to the macro level rather than like the micro level here, society has a problem with us because it doesn't know how to deal with us. Why, though? We've been around since literally the beginning of the species. So, come on. I know you're playing a big game of catch-up because science is not as advanced as it could be. But in order to change science, we need to change the way we think. All right, so that's my little talking point on that one. But to continue, maximize the document. Thank you. All right. Sorry, lost my spot. Okay. If a selected applicant requests an accommodation, the employer shall consult with the applicant and provide or arrange for the provision of a suitable accommodation in a manner that takes into account the applicant's accessibility needs due to disability. All right, you see from the very nature of that statement, and I want y'all to keep your minds open to this one. You see from the very nature of that statement that the onus is being put on the applicant to disclose and also to work out with their employer how the accommodation should be made. It also gives the employer quite a bit of wiggle room to say, well, maybe we can't do that, but let's try this slightly less financially burdensome thing instead. That's one of the problems I have with society. They think that disability is expensive. Thing is, if accommodation for and recognition of disability were built into the system from the very beginning, not only would it not be called disability, but we would also have the finances more than available to help people with disabilities, okay? In the workforce, in education, in society in general. I think. All right. Notice to successful applicants. All right. Every employer shall, when making offers of employment, notify the successful applicant of its policies for accommodating employees with disabilities. In other words, you got to disclose. And because of the social pressure against people with disabilities, not very many people are inclined to disclose about their disabilities right from the get-go. All right? Because again, we are seen as a physical burden, we are seen as a financial burden, and the IASR is getting my Irish up. I can use that term, I'm half Irish. Thank you. Okay. Informing employees of supports. Every employer shall inform its employees of its policies used to support its employees with disabilities, including but not limited to policies on the provision of job accommodations that take into account an employee's accessibility needs due to disability. Okay, that one's pretty long-winded, but also self-explanatory. Employers shall provide the information required under this section to new employees as soon as practicable after they begin their employment. After they begin their employment, not before. I have a bit of an issue with that one because if you're not aware of the rights to which you are entitled, you're not going to know what to ask for. All right? Unless I'm interpreting that statement wrong, my advisor, wink, will probably let me know. She's smarter than me. Okay. 3. Employees shall provide updated information to its employers, shall provide updated information to its employees whenever there is a change to existing policies on the provision of job accommodations that take into account an employee's accessibility needs due to disability. All right? Again, self-explanatory. Accessible formats and communication supports for employers. Okay. This one's important because what am I doing right now? I'm on the computer, right? This is a communication mechanism. So, kind of important. In addition to its obligations under Section 12, where an employee with a disability so requests it, every employer shall consult with the employee to provide or arrange for the provision of accessible formats and communication supports for A, information that is needed in order to perform the employee's job, and B, information that is generally available to employees in the workplace. Why is this font so crampy? I don't like it. Okay, so back before the widespread existence of computers and the internet in elementary school, I used these massively massive large print textbooks to, do my readings for class. And these things were huge. They were probably the size of my computer monitor and, yay thick, like 2 or 3 inches thick kind of thing. Heaven only knows how I managed to fit them in my backpack, but my backpack was considerably heavier than a lot of other kids. That was, at the time, considered accessible. However, if I had used Braille, it would have been even worse because Braille takes up more space than physical print. And I remember with a friend of mine in elementary school that they had Braille textbooks, and these things would be printed in actual volumes, like Volume 1, Math, Volume 2, Math, same book, Volume 3, Math, same book. I think their Braille Bible came in, I think it was 15 different volumes or more. Just ridiculous amount of space that this used and ridiculous amount of paper that this used. However, with me, Braille could have potentially been more beneficial because even with large print, you see me lean close to the screen here, right? What I have in front of me right now is in 16-point font. Okay, so even with large print, I'm still at a visual disadvantage. If I had been given, and I wasn't, consistent training and teaching on how to read and write Braille. Braille is not a language, by the way. It is a writing and reading system. It's basically the equivalent of print. All right? Just like print is not a language, it is the expression of a language. But If I had been given consistent teaching and training in how to use Braille, it would have been a lot better for me, I think. And I could have potentially breezed through my work quicker than I did. Once technology kicked more into gear and I was able to put my textbooks on USB, I carried this around with me rather than these around with me. And my grades, correspondingly, went up because you can adjust the font size with technology. You can also listen to your textbooks. Okay? There's more than one way to pet a cat. I don't like the statement skin a cat. I think, sorry, it's creepy. There's more than one way to pet a cat, and I found a very good way for myself through the use of audio. All right? Audio could potentially destroy you for wanting to read print or for wanting to read Braille, potentially, but you don't have to let it. That's the thing, right? But with accessibility, is greater utility. I have the ability, wow, ility words, lots of them, but I have the ability to listen to things now rather than attempting to read them. I can't read Braille. I kind of struggle to read print. I can read and write, obviously, I can, but, it was never really considered what we should do with Lily. It was more the consideration that I should attempt to look normal. Can you define what normal means for me, please? If you can, good for you. You get a gold star and a cookie. But I've never really been able to define what normal is. Anyway, moving on. Okay, sorry. The employer shall consult with the employee, making the request in determining the suitability of an accessible format or communication support. Yes, thank you. I would have appreciated that in elementary school. Mind you, in elementary school, I was still worried about fitting in. Not anymore. All right, moving on. Workplace emergency response information. Okay, you know what? I'm going to break this up into 2 videos. So this is going to be the last section on the employment segment. And then I'm going to do the rest of it on Monday, if y'all don't mind. Because I don't want this getting too annoying for all of you. Because this is in a different format from the TRC or the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It's not quite so uniform. It's not quite so boom, 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 right? So, like I say, too, the font is a bit of a struggle. Gotta work that out. But, yeah, I'm going to divide this into 2 if y'all don't mind. All right. Workplace emergency response information. Oh, yeah, this is important. Pay attention. Every employer shall provide individualized workplace emergency response information to employees who have a disability. If the disability is such that the individualized information is necessary and the employer is aware of the need for accommodation due to the employee's disability. Okay. I need to know how to get out of the building if it's on fire. That's kind of important. This is what I mean by kind of important. Okay? If someone's having a heart attack, I can't do CPR. So I gotta know where the phone is so that I can call 911. Just in case my cell phone's dead. That kind of thing. These are important things to know. All right? Next. If an employee who receives individualized workplace emergency response information requires assistance and with the employee's consent, the employer shall provide the workplace emergency response information to the person designated by the employer to provide assistance to the employee. That is a really roundabout way of saying that they'll find you a buddy. It sounds like they're saying they'll find you a buddy. Yeah, a lot of people with disabilities do use the buddy system. It's like, okay, This is not necessarily the case for everybody, okay? I'm generalizing, and I shouldn't be, but let's say I were fully blind, okay? If I need help getting out of the building because the building is on fire, I might appreciate some help from a person who can see where they're going. All right? So if you are the designated buddy, shall we say, then it is the two people's joint responsibility to find one another and to get the heck out of the building. That's just an example, okay? And like I say, I know I'm generalizing, but that's the takeaway I get from that. All right. Employers shall provide the information required under this section as soon as practicable, I hate that word, after the employer becomes aware of the need for accommodation due to the employee's disability. So in other words, yeah, you gotta disclose. For me, it's difficult not to disclose because I carry a white cane. And I've shown you guys my cane in a video, again, yeehaw, way back in the past. But yeah, that's how I get around. So difficult for me not to disclose, but for people who haven't disclosed or who don't want to disclose for socially obvious reasons, that provision is quite important. All right. Every employer shall review the individualized workplace emergency response information. Yes, every workplace does this. If your workplace doesn't do this, they're breaking the law. All right. Sorry, that wasn't over yet. Okay. Every employer shall review the individualized workplace emergency response information. When the employee moves to a different location in the organization. Yes. B, when the employee's overall accommodation needs or plans are reviewed. Wow. And C, when the employer reviews its general emergency response policies. Okay, so number C there is what I was kind of trying to talk about. Every single year, at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of like your work term, shall we say, your employer is supposed to go over the emergency response protocol with every single employee on the rap sheet. But for people with disabilities, it can be more difficult. So there is a certain measure of, okay, how do we find a way that works for you that still, let's say, again, it's a fire drill, keeps you with the group so that you don't go missing and we think you're dead, right? So accommodations may need to be made in a case like that. Like I said before, the buddy system works. All right, 5, and this is the last one for today. Revoked OREG 165.16. Okay, I don't know what that means. I'm going to look it up. Doesn't matter. That's legalese. And that's as far as I'm going to go with this one for now. So, maximizing my camera. Boo. Okay, cool. That's as far as we're going for today. But I will continue with this on Monday. It looked shorter than it was. Sorry. But I don't want to make this video any longer because, as I say, this can be kind of dry. But hopefully my commentary makes this a little more interesting because I have strong opinions about some of these things. Good Lord. We're back on my stomping grounds, and I am not happy with the province of Ontario at the moment, Justin. I can take issue with him too. I don't like him. But anyway, it's not just his fault. All right, so I will see you all on Monday to finish up with the employment standards in the IASR, and then we will move on from there to another section that I find interesting. I've heard that there's a section with only like one protocol in it. I might do that one next, just to, get it out of the way of it. Yeah, cool. All right, so have a lovely, wonderful weekend. It is lovely, wonderful, and warm outside. Hopefully it is where you are too. And enjoy yourselves. And I will see you all on Monday. Mwah.